Welcome to Void of Fears. I've been checking my analytics, and I noticed that 46% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. We're on the journey to 10k subscribers, and your support would mean everything. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button takes just a second and doesn't cost a thing. You can always change your mind later, but your subscription helps this channel grow more than you know. While you're at it, drop a like on this video to help it reach more people who might enjoy facing their fears with us. Now let's dive into today's story. My name is Jaxon Harper, and I'm about to die. At least, that's what I thought as my spacecraft spiraled toward the surface of Eris IX, a planet that wasn't supposed to be inhabited. The mission was simple: fly to the outer reaches of this newly discovered solar system, gather data on the mysterious 9th planet, and return to Earth. Observe only, Commander Reyes had emphasized during my final briefing. No contact with potential life forms. I remember laughing at that. Life forms? On that rock, the atmospheric readings are off the charts toxic. Now, as warning lights flashed across my control panel, and the ship's hull screamed under the pressure of entry, those words felt like a cruel joke. Something had gone catastrophically wrong during my approach. Some kind of electromagnetic storm that the preliminary scans hadn't detected. It fried my navigation systems and sent my ship into an uncontrollable descent. Mayday, Mayday. This is Reconnaissance Vessel Horizon. I've lost control and am entering atmosphere on Eris IX. Coordinates. I frantically punched buttons trying to transmit my position, but the communication system was dead. No one would hear me. No one would know where I'd crashed. No one would come looking. The last thing I remember was the horrifying view through my viewport. Jagged mountain peaks rushing up to meet me, black storm clouds swirling overhead, and a landscape so desolate it looked like hell itself. Then impact, pain, darkness. I shouldn't have survived. That's the first thought that crossed my mind when consciousness returned. The cockpit was crushed around me, sparks flying from destroyed electronics, the acrid smell of burning plastic filling my lungs. But somehow I was alive. My hands trembled as I unbuckled my harness and assessed the damage. The life support system was failing, oxygen levels critically low. Most of my equipment was destroyed. The emergency beacon was silent. I had maybe 3 days of emergency rations if I stretched them. I was going to die here, just more slowly than expected. With nothing to lose, I forced open the damaged airlock and stepped onto the surface of Eris IX. The air hit my lungs like ice water, breathable, surprisingly, but thin and bitter. The landscape sprawled before me was even more nightmarish than it had appeared from above. The ground was parched and cracked, covered in a strange ash-like substance. Massive rock formations twisted upward like petrified tentacles, backlit by flashes of purple lightning from the perpetually stormy sky. There was no sun visible, just an oppressive darkness occasionally illuminated by those eerie lightning bursts. I'd taken perhaps 20 steps from my wreckage when I first sensed I wasn't alone. They emerged from behind the rock formations, from crevices in the ground I hadn't noticed, moving with an unsettling grace that made my skin crawl. Tall, impossibly thin humanoids with skin so pale it was almost translucent. And their eyes, God, their eyes. They glowed with an internal light, shifting between amber and violet as they blinked. I froze, hand instinctively reaching for the emergency sidearm strapped to my flight suit, but before I could draw it, something extraordinary happened. As one, the creatures sank to their knees, their long, spindly limbs folded beneath them as they prostrated themselves on the ashen ground. A sound rose from them, a harmonic, clicking language that seemed to reverberate inside my skull, rather than through my ears. And strangest of all, I understood it. Not immediately, not completely, but fragments of meaning penetrated my mind as if bypassing my ears entirely. The Starfallen has arrived. The prophecy fulfilled. Our salvation. The God from beyond the void. I raised my hands, backing away. No, there's been a mistake. I'm human, from Earth. I'm not whatever you think I am. But they didn't rise. If anything, my words seemed to intensify their reverence. More of them emerged from hiding places, until perhaps 30 of the alien beings surrounded me, all kneeling, all with those luminous eyes fixed upon me. One of them, taller than the rest and adorned with intricate markings carved into its pale flesh, approached on its knees. It extended a multi-jointed hand, offering what appeared to be a carved stone emblem. "Welcome, Starfallen God," it said, the words somehow forming in my mind. "We have awaited your descent for generations. Eris calls to her chosen one. The shadow hungers for your light." I didn't take the emblem. I couldn't move, couldn't process what was happening. These beings, intelligent aliens, were worshipping me as some kind of deity. The absurdity of it might have made me laugh if I weren't so terrified. "I'm not a god," I said firmly. "My ship crashed. I'm stranded here. I need help, not worship." The leader tilted its head, the glow in its eyes pulsing. "The Starfallen comes in confusion, as foretold. You will remember your purpose soon. Come, the temple awaits." What followed was a procession unlike anything I could have imagined. The aliens, who I would later learn called themselves the Elkarii, formed a protective circle around me as we travelled across the barren landscape. They moved with eerie synchronicity, their long limbs carrying them over the rough terrain with fluid grace. As we walked, the leader, who introduced himself as Captain Elroth, attempted to explain their beliefs. Much was lost in whatever strange translation was occurring in my mind, but I gathered that they believed a god would fall from the stars to save their dying world. This god would restore balance, drive back something they called the shadow, and bring life back to their planet. "Your vessel of fire," Elroth gestured back toward my crashed ship. "It is exactly as our prophecies described. You came in pain and confusion, but you will remember your divinity soon." I tried arguing, explaining scientific concepts of space travel and the reality of my human limitations, but my words seemed to confirm rather than dispel their beliefs. Everything I said was interpreted as further proof of their prophecy. After walking for what felt like hours, we reached their settlement, a sprawling network of structures built into the face of a mountain range. The architecture was alien, yet strangely beautiful, all smooth curves and precise angles that seemed to defy conventional engineering. The buildings appeared to be constructed from a strange blackened stone that absorbed, rather than reflected, the occasional flashes of lightning. As we entered the settlement, more Elkarii emerged from their dwellings. They lined the pathway, kneeling as I passed, touching their foreheads to the ground. Some left offerings in my path, strange crystalline objects, carved figurines, vessels containing liquids that glowed with bioluminescence. I was led to what appeared to be a central gathering place, a vast circular chamber carved into the mountain itself. The walls were lined with what looked like primitive cave paintings depicting tall, stretched figures bowing before a bright object falling from the sky. At the centre of the room stood an altar of the same black stone that made up their buildings. "Please," I tried again, desperation creeping into my voice. "I'm just a human. My species sent me to explore this solar system. I'm not divine. I can't save your world." Elroth's expression remained impassive, but a new figure stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Unlike the others, this Elkarii was adorned with elaborate garments made from materials I couldn't identify, fabrics that seemed to shift colours with each movement, adorned with small objects that might have been bones or crystalline fragments. "I am Rissa," she said, a mental voice somehow more refined, more articulate than Elroth's, "High Priestess of the Elkarii. Do not fear your confusion, Starfallen One. It is part of the divine transition." There was something different about Rissa, a sharpness to her gaze that suggested a more analytical mind than the others. She approached me with careful steps, circling me like a scientist, examining a specimen. "Your form is as the ancient texts described," she said, "but your essence..." She paused, those glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Your essence is still becoming." "My essence is human," I insisted, "and it's going to die here if I can't find a way to repair my ship or signal for rescue." Rissa exchanged a look with Elroth that I couldn't interpret. "The Starfallen speaks of death," she said. "This too was foretold. Before ascension, there must be fear. Before divinity, there must be mortality." What followed was an elaborate ceremony that I endured in a state of numb disbelief. I was seated on a throne-like chair carved from the same black stone. The Elkarii brought forth various offerings, strange foods that I was hesitant to eat, vessels containing liquids that smelled like nothing I'd encountered before, objects of apparent religious significance that they placed at my feet. Throughout it all, I continued trying to explain the reality of my situation, but my words were reinterpreted through the lens of their beliefs. My description of Earth became tales of the celestial realm. My explanation of space travel became the divine journey through the void. My fear and confusion were seen as necessary steps in my awakening to godhood. As the ceremony concluded, Rissa approached me again. "You must rest now, Starfallen. Tomorrow we begin the first ritual of awakening." "Ritual?" I asked, alarm rising in my chest. "To help you remember your purpose," she said calmly. "To awaken the power within you that will drive back the shadow and heal our world." I was led to private quarters, a spacious chamber higher up in the mountain complex. The room was sparsely furnished, but comfortable by alien standards. A window overlooked the settlement below and the desolate landscape beyond. Left alone at last, I sank onto what appeared to be a sleeping platform and buried my face in my hands. The Elkarii truly believed I was a god, and nothing I said could convince them otherwise. My scientific mind raced through explanations. Perhaps they had encountered humans before. Perhaps some ancient astronaut had crashed here in the past, giving rise to their religion. Or was it simply convergent evolution, different species independently developing similar forms across the universe? Whatever the explanation, I was trapped in a dangerous situation. These aliens expected divine miracles from me. What would happen when I inevitably failed to deliver? As I pondered this, movement outside my window caught my attention. A smaller Elkarii was scaling the side of the building with impressive agility, clearly trying to avoid detection. Before I could react, the figure slipped through my window and crouched low, gesturing for silence. This Elkarii was notably different from the others, younger with less pronounced features and eyes that glowed a more subdued blue. Unlike the others, this one wore no markings or adornments. "They lie to you, Skyfaller," the young Elkarii said, the mental voice urgent and strained. "I am Talon. Not all of us believe the prophecy." I sat up straight. "You don't think I'm a god?" Talon made a gesture that might have been their equivalent of a scoff. "The prophecy is real, but its meaning has been distorted. You are not our salvation. You are our sacrifice." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "They aren't worshipping you," Talon said, eyes darting nervously toward the door. "They're feeding you to it. To the shadow." Before I could question further, Talon's head snapped towards the door. "Someone comes. I will find you again when it's safe. But beware the rituals. Beware the priestess. She knows more than she tells." With that, Talon slipped back out the window and disappeared into the darkness just as my door opened, to reveal Rissa carrying what appeared to be a container of water. "The Starfallen need sustenance," she said, placing the container beside my bed. "Rest well. Tomorrow your journey truly begins." After she left, I stared at the container, Talon's warning echoing in my mind. Was I being poisoned? Drugged? I was desperately thirsty. But now paranoia had taken hold. In the end, thirst won out. I took a small sip, prepared to spit it out at the first sign of strange taste, but it was simply water, cool, refreshing, and seemingly pure. I drank deeply, my body's needs overriding my fears. That night I dreamed of darkness. Not the absence of light, but an active, moving darkness that seemed to reach for me with tendrils of void. And within that darkness, eyes opened, thousands of them, all glowing with the same eerie light as the Elkarii, but somehow older, hungrier. I woke gasping, my body drenched in sweat. The strange light of dawn, more a lessening of darkness than true daylight, filtered through my window. And as I raised my hands to wipe my face, I noticed something alarming. Thin, black lines beneath the skin of my wrists, like veins filled with ink. I frantically examined my arms, finding more of these dark veins spreading up from my hands. They hadn't been there the day before. Something was happening to me, something beyond my understanding. Before I could process this disturbing development, my door opened and Elroth entered, accompanied by two other Elkarii. "The Starfallen awakens," Elroth said. "It is time for the first ritual." "What's happening to me?" I demanded, showing him my darkened veins. "What have you done?" Elroth's eyes pulsed with what might have been excitement. "The awakening begins. Your divine essence stirs." I was given no choice but to follow, as they led me through the settlement, down pathways I hadn't seen the previous day. Deeper into the mountain, we descended into what felt like the heart of the rocky formation, the temperature dropping with each step, the air growing thicker with some acrid, earthy smell I couldn't identify. Finally, we entered a vast cavern unlike any other part of the settlement. While their dwellings had been constructed with precise engineering, this space felt primordial, untouched by intelligent design. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like frozen tentacles, and at the center of the chamber lay a pool of what appeared to be black liquid. But it wasn't liquid. Not exactly. It moved with purpose, rippling and shifting, even when the air was still, occasionally forming shapes that almost resembled hands before dissolving back into formlessness. Around the pool stood dozens of Elkarii, including Rissa, who wore even more elaborate ceremonial garb than before. As I was led to the edge of the pool, I noticed strange carvings in the stone floor, symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly, as if they existed partly in dimensions I couldn't perceive. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the black substance. "The shadow," Rissa answered simply, "or rather, a manifestation of it. The true shadow lies deeper, beneath our world, growing stronger as our planet dies." "And what do you expect me to do with it?" "Commune with it," she said. "Absorb its essence, and in doing so, learn to control it. This is how you will remember your purpose, Starfallen." Every instinct in my body screamed danger. Whatever that substance was, it wasn't natural. The way it moved, the way it seemed to reach toward me when I got close, it was sentient, hungry. "I won't touch that thing," I said, backing away. "This has gone far enough. I'm not your god, and I can't help you." Elroth stepped forward, his posture suddenly threatening. "The ritual must be completed. It is foretold." "And if I refuse?" Rissa's eyes narrowed. "Then our world dies, and you with it." The threat was clear. I glanced around the chamber, noting the armed Elkarii guards blocking the exit. I was outnumbered, in an unfamiliar environment, with no weapons and nowhere to run. Reluctantly, I approached the pool again. "What do I need to do?" "Place your hands upon the surface," Rissa instructed. "Open your mind to the shadow's whispers. Let it recognize its master." Taking a deep breath, I knelt at the edge of the pool and slowly extended my hands. As my fingertips hovered just above the black substance, it surged upward, forming tendrils that reached for my skin with unmistakable eagerness. The moment contact was made, agony shot through my body. It felt like liquid fire injected directly into my veins, spreading from my hands up my arms and throughout my torso. I tried to pull away, but the black substance clung to me, seeping into my pores, wrapping around my fingers like living shackles. Around me, the Elkarii began chanting in their strange, clicking language. The sound resonated through the chamber, creating harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The pain intensified, and with it came visions, flashes of memories that weren't my own. I saw Eris IX as it once was, a vibrant world of sprawling forests and vast oceans. I saw the Elkarii as they had been, a thriving civilization with technology that rivaled anything on Earth. And I saw the moment of catastrophe, a great drilling machine piercing deep into the planet's core, unleashing something ancient and malevolent from its prison. The shadow. As these visions flooded my consciousness, something else happened. Something inexplicable. The chamber around me began to change. The perpetual darkness that had blanketed the planet since my arrival briefly lifted. Through cracks in the cavern ceiling, I glimpsed actual sunlight streaming down for the first time. The Elkarii's chanting reached a crescendo, their bodies swaying in rhythmic synchronicity. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the connection broke. The black substance retreated into the pool, leaving me gasping on my hands and knees at its edge. But the changes to my body remained. The black veins had spread further, now reaching my chest and neck, and I felt different, stronger. My senses heightened to an almost painful degree. I could hear the Elkarii's heartbeats, smell the chemical composition of the air, see microscopic details in the stone floor beneath me. "It is done," Rissa announced, her mental voice reverent. "The first communion is complete." I staggered to my feet, my body feeling simultaneously heavier and lighter than before. "What happened? What did you do to me?" "We did nothing, Starfallen," she replied. "You have begun remembering your power. Look." She gestured towards the cavern entrance where sunlight continued to stream in. Outside I could hear commotion, excited voices, movement. Supported by Elroth, I made my way back up to the settlement surface. What I saw there defied all scientific explanation. The perpetual storm that had engulfed the planet had temporarily abated. The sky, previously an unbroken expanse of roiling black clouds, now showed patches of azure atmosphere, and most incredibly, the barren ground had sprouted life, small, pale plants pushing up through the ashen soil like time-lapse photography. "You see," Elroth said, his mental voice triumphant. "The first healing begins. You are remembering your purpose." The Elkarii around us had fallen to their knees again, some openly weeping at the sight of sunlight, others touching the new plants with reverent fingers. I couldn't process what I was seeing. There was no scientific explanation for how my contact with that black substance could have affected planetary weather patterns or stimulated plant growth. It was impossible. And yet the evidence was before my eyes. Even more disturbing was the realization that some part of me had enjoyed the power. Beneath the pain, I had felt a rush of exhilaration, unlike anything I'd experienced before. I found myself wanting to return to the pool, to feel that connection again, to see what else I could do. These thoughts terrified me. They weren't my own, couldn't be. Something was happening to my mind as well as my body. As the Elkarii celebrated around me, I caught sight of a familiar figure watching from the shadows. Talon, the young outcast who had warned me. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw not joy but deep concern in that gaze. Talon shook his head slightly, then disappeared into the crowd. That night, as I lay in my quarters unable to sleep, I heard the now familiar sound of someone scaling the outer wall. Talon slipped through my window, more agitated than before. "It's worse than I feared," he said without preamble. The shadow has marked you deeply. Already, it changes you. I showed him the black veins, which had continued to spread across my body. What is happening to me? And how did I change the weather, make plants grow? It's scientifically impossible. The shadow is not bound by your science, Talon said. It exists in other ways, other places. He struggled to explain, his mental voice fragmented, with concepts I couldn't grasp. It was imprisoned beneath our world eons ago, but our ancestors unleashed it while mining for resources. Since then, it has slowly consumed our planet, our people. And the prophecy, the Starfallen God. Talon's eyes dimmed slightly. A corruption of truth. There were warnings in our ancient texts about skyfallers who would become vessels for the shadow. Somehow, over generations, these warnings transformed into worship. He looked at me intently. You are not the first to crash here, Skyfaller. Others came before. They too were taken to the shadow. They too began to change. A chill ran through me. What happened to them? They became something else, neither themselves nor fully shadow. They performed miracles as you did today. They spoke prophecies, and then... Talon hesitated. Then they were consumed entirely. The shadow grew stronger with each one. Our world grew weaker. I sank onto my bed, the horror of my situation becoming clear. I'm being transformed into some kind of vessel for this entity. It's parasitic. Talon nodded. The rituals accelerate the process. Each communion with the shadow pool gives it greater hold over you. How do I stop it? How do I reverse what's already been done? I don't know if you can, Talon admitted. But there are others like me, a resistance. We've studied the true ancient texts, not the corrupted versions Rissa teaches. There might be answers in the deep ruins, where our ancestors first encountered the shadow. Then take me there, I urged. Talon shook his head. Not yet. You are watched too closely. And... He hesitated. I'm not certain you can be trusted. The shadow may already influence your thoughts. We must be cautious. Before I could protest, a sound from the corridor outside my room alerted us to someone approaching. Talon slipped back out the window with a final warning. Resist the next ritual, no matter what they threaten. The more you commune with the shadow, the less of yourself remains. The door opened to reveal Rissa, her eyes glowing more intensely than I'd seen before. She glanced at the window, then back at me, her expression unreadable. The Starfallen should rest, she said. Tomorrow's ritual will require greater strength. There won't be another ritual, I said firmly. Whatever you think I am, you're wrong. And whatever that black substance is, it's changing me in ways I don't consent to. Rissa approached, studying the progression of black veins across my skin, with what seemed like satisfaction. Change is the nature of ascension. Your mortal form must transform, to channel the divine power. It's not divine, I countered. It's parasitic. It's consuming me, just like it's consuming your planet. Something flashed in Rissa's eyes. Perhaps surprise, perhaps anger. You have spoken with the heretic, Talon. I kept my expression neutral. I've figured it out for myself. I'm a scientist. I observe, I analyze. And what I'm observing is that your shadow is a parasite that your ancestors accidentally released from underground. It's not a god. It's a planetary infection. Rissa was silent for a long moment, her head tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. When she spoke again, her mental voice had changed. There was an edge to it that hadn't been present before. You understand so little, Starfallen. The shadow is neither god nor parasite. It is older than such concepts. It slept beneath our world since this planet formed around it. When we found it, we did not release it. We awakened it. And yes, it hungers. It consumes, but through consumption comes transformation. She reached out, her long fingers tracing the black veins on my arm. Her touch sent uncomfortable ripples of sensation through my altered tissues. The mistake of our ancestors was fearing the transformation. They tried to resist, to fight back, to reseal the shadow. Their resistance is what caused our world's slow death. Her eyes met mine, burning with fervor. But you are different. You can embrace the transformation, become one with the shadow, guide it, and in doing so, restore balance. By becoming a parasite myself, I pulled away from her touch. I've seen what's happening to me. These veins, these changes. I'm being consumed. You are being elevated, she corrected. As we speak, your body is evolving beyond its human limitations. Did you not feel the power today? Did you not revel in it? I couldn't deny it. Beneath my fear and revulsion had been a disturbing undercurrent of pleasure, a rush of sensation when the black substance had entered my veins, a surge of exhilaration when I'd felt the planet respond to my presence. Rissa saw the conflict in my expression and smiled. The rituals merely accelerate what is already happening. The shadow chose you the moment your vessel crashed on our world. Refuse the rituals, if you wish. The transformation will continue regardless, only slower, more painful. She turned to leave. Rest now, consider your path. The universe has chosen you for greatness. Starfallen, embrace it. After she left, I paced my room in agitation, examining my changing body with mounting horror. The black veins now reached my jawline, spreading like a web beneath my skin, and with them came other changes. My vision now allowed me to see in complete darkness. My hearing picked up sounds from across the settlement, and most disturbingly, I could sense the emotions of nearby Elkarii, like faint radioactive signatures. I needed to escape, to find Talon and his resistance, to reach the ruins he'd mentioned, and discover if there was any way to reverse what was happening to me. But more than that, I needed to understand what the shadow truly was. Because despite my scientific background and logical mind, I was facing something beyond conventional explanation. The way it had shown me visions, the way it had altered planetary conditions through my touch, these things defied the laws of physics as I understood them. That night, as I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, the dreams returned, more vivid, more invasive than before. I stood in a vast emptiness, darker than space itself. Before me hovered a shape that constantly shifted, never settling on a single form but cycling through countless iterations of something almost comprehensible. Vessel, it said, though not in words. The concept simply appeared in my mind, accompanied by a sensation of being examined from within. "What are you?" I asked the shifting darkness. "Older than your kind's first thought," came the response. "Younger than the last star's death. I am potential. I am hunger. I am becoming." "You're consuming me," I accused, "turning me into something else." The darkness rippled in what might have been amusement. "You were always becoming something else. From your first breath, you moved toward death. I offer different transformation. Not an ending, but a transcendence." "I don't want transcendence. I want to remain myself." "There is no fixed self," the darkness replied. "Only moments of stability and endless change. Your resistance is expected, necessary even. The vessel must be strong enough to contain me. If you yield too easily, you will be consumed entirely. If you fight well, we merge as equals." Before I could respond, the darkness surged forward, enveloping me. But instead of fear, I felt a rush of knowledge. Images, concepts, sensations from across time and space flooding my consciousness. I saw the formation of planets, the birth of stars, the evolution of countless species across multiple galaxies. And I saw more personal things, my own memories but viewed from outside, as if I were an observer to my own life. I woke with a gasp, my body drenched in sweat. The room around me came into focus with disturbing clarity. I could see microscopic details in the stone walls, count individual dust particles floating in the air, and I realized with horror that I could feel the presence of the Elkarii throughout the settlement, their life forces glowing like embers in my mind's eye. When Elroth came to escort me to the second ritual, I was waiting. "I won't participate," I told him firmly. "Whatever the shadow is, I refuse to let it consume me further." Elroth's expression darkened. "The rituals are not optional, Starfallen. The cycle must continue." "And if I resist?" I challenged. His hand moved to a weapon at his belt, a curved blade made of the same black material as the pool. "Then we will carry you. The shadow will have its communion, with or without your cooperation." I considered fighting, but even with my enhanced strength, I was outnumbered, and part of me, a growing part that I didn't recognize as myself, wanted to return to the pool, to feel that rush of power again. This time, I was led deeper into the mountain complex, down passages that spiraled ever downward. The temperature dropped with each level we descended, and the air grew thick with the acrid smell I now associated with the shadow. We finally emerged into a chamber even larger than the first one, but this space showed signs of ancient technology. The walls were lined with what appeared to be dormant machines, devices constructed from materials I couldn't identify, covered in the same strange symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. At the center of this chamber was not a pool, but a pillar of the black substance rising from floor to ceiling, constantly shifting and flowing within an invisible boundary. Around it stood dozens of Elkarii, including Rissa, who now wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor composed of interlocking plates that might once have been technology, but now served a ritualistic purpose. "The second communion," she announced as I was brought before the pillar, "through which the Starfallen will access the memories of those who came before." Those who came before. Talon's warning echoed in my mind. I wasn't the first to crash here, to be subjected to these rituals. Others had been consumed by the shadow, adding their knowledge, their essence to its collective. "I won't do it," I said, planting my feet firmly. "I've seen what it's doing to me. This stops now." Rissa's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you need motivation." She gestured, and from the shadows, guards brought forward a struggling figure, Talon. The young Elkarii had been beaten, his pale skin marked with bruises, one eye swollen shut. He was forced to his knees before me. "The heretic was caught attempting to access the ancient archives," Rissa said coldly. "He has poisoned your mind with half-truths and misunderstandings. Commune with the shadow, learn the full truth, or watch him die." Talon looked up at me, his one good eye dim with pain but resolute. "Don't," he said weakly. "This is what it wants. To use your compassion against you." I looked from Talon to the pillar of darkness, feeling trapped. If I refused, they would kill Talon. If I complied, I would lose more of myself to the shadow. Either way, I was being manipulated. "There must be another way," I said, desperately searching for options. "There is not," Rissa replied. "The cycle continues as it must. Choose, Starfallen." In that moment of indecision, something unexpected happened. The black veins that had spread across my body began to move of their own accord, rippling beneath my skin like living things. Pain shot through me as they writhed, and I felt a presence in my mind, the shadow reaching for me even without the ritual. "It's already happening," I gasped, dropping to one knee as the pain intensified. "It's taking me regardless." Rissa watched with fascination. The bond grows stronger than anticipated. The shadow calls to its vessel. Through waves of agony, I saw the pillar of darkness responding to my distress, pulsing and reaching toward me, with tendrils that strained against their invisible containment. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. The shadow wanted me. It needed me to come willingly, to accept the transformation. That's why the rituals existed, to facilitate a gradual, consensual merging, which meant I still had agency, I still had choice. With tremendous effort, I stood upright, fighting through the pain. "Release Talon," I demanded, my voice stronger than I expected. "Release him, and I'll complete your ritual." Elroth looked to Rissa, who considered for a moment before nodding. The guards released Talon, who collapsed to the floor. "He lives for now," Rissa conceded. "Complete the communion, and he remains unharmed." I approached the pillar of darkness, my body responding to its proximity with both revulsion and yearning. The black veins beneath my skin pulsed in synchronization with the flowing patterns within the pillar. "What do I do?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Embrace it," Rissa said simply. "Let it show you what you truly are." Steeling myself, I reached out and placed both hands against the pillar. The moment contact was made, the barrier containing it seemed to dissolve. The black substance surged around me, enveloping my body like a cocoon. The pain was beyond description. Every cell in my body felt like it was being dismantled and reconstructed. But beyond the pain came knowledge, flooding into my consciousness like a tidal wave. I saw the history of Eris IX, the rise and fall of the Elkarii civilization, the catastrophic moment when their mining operation pierced the ancient chamber where the shadow had lain dormant for millions of years. And I saw the others, the previous Starfallen gods. There had been 7 before me, spanning centuries, alien explorers from different worlds, different species, all who had crashed on Eris IX. Each had undergone the same rituals, the same transformation. Each had gained incredible powers, each had temporarily restored portions of the planet, and each had eventually been consumed entirely, their consciousness absorbed into the Shadow's collective, their physical forms dissolved into the black substance. The most recent had been another human, a woman whose research vessel had malfunctioned much like mine. Through the Shadow's memories, I experienced her transformation, her initial resistance, her gradual acceptance, and finally her complete surrender to the entity. Her knowledge, her memories, her very essence had been added to the Shadows, making it stronger, more adaptable, more knowledgeable about humans. That's why it had been able to reach me so easily, why the transformation was happening faster than with previous vessels. It was learning, evolving with each absorption. As these revelations cascaded through my mind, I became aware of physical changes accelerating throughout my body. The black veins were no longer just beneath my skin. They had penetrated deeper, infiltrating my organs, restructuring my cellular makeup. I could feel my perception expanding beyond normal human limitations, my consciousness stretching to encompass the entire mountain complex and beyond. With horror and fascination, I realized I could sense every Elkarii in the settlement, feel their life forces pulsing like distant heartbeats. I could perceive the dying ecosystem of the planet, the slow corruption spreading from the Shadow's underground prison. And most disturbingly, I could feel the boundaries of my own identity beginning to blur, merging with the Shadow's vast alien consciousness. When the ritual finally ended, and the black substance receded from my body, I collapsed to the floor, gasping. The Elkarii around me had fallen silent, staring in awe. It took me a moment to understand why. My physical appearance had changed dramatically. The black veins now covered most of my visible skin, and when I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a polished surface nearby, I saw that my eyes had changed as well, now glowing with the same eerie light as the Elkarii's. "The second communion is complete," Rissa announced, her voice reverent. "The Starfallen awakens further." I struggled to my feet, my body feeling simultaneously heavier and lighter than before. My mind was overwhelmed with new awareness, new understanding. Part of me was horrified at what I was becoming. Another part, growing stronger by the moment, reveled in the transformation. "Take me to the surface," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange to my altered ears. deeper with harmonic undertones like the Elkarii's speech. They obeyed without question, leading me up through the complex. As we ascended, I remained aware of Talon being escorted separately, still a prisoner, but alive as promised. When we reached the surface, the changes to the planet were even more pronounced than after the first ritual. The sky had cleared further, revealing a pale blue expanse dotted with unfamiliar constellations. The ground, previously barren and ash-covered, now sprouted vegetation in all directions, small trees taking root, grasses spreading across the once dead soil, even small creatures scurrying through the undergrowth. The Elkarii settlement itself was transforming. The black stone buildings now pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, and the inhabitants moved with renewed vigor. Throughout the settlement, Elkarii fell to their knees as I passed, their worship more fervent than ever. I could feel the planet responding to my presence, to the changes within me. The shadow's power, channeled through my transformed body, was temporarily reversing the corruption that had plagued Eris IX for generations. But I understood now that it was merely a fluctuation, not a permanent healing. Without complete merger, without my total surrender to the shadow, the effects would fade. That night, as I sat alone in my quarters contemplating what I was becoming, my door opened to reveal Elroth. "The Starfallen must prepare," he said without preamble. "The final ritual approaches, the Ascension." "Ascension," I repeated, the word carrying new meaning, now that I had glimpsed the shadow's memories. "You mean my complete absorption?" Elroth's expression remained impassive. "The complete union of vessel and shadow, the fulfillment of prophecy. And then what? What happens to your world when I'm gone?" "Balance is restored," he said simply. "The shadow, contained within its divine vessel, retreats to the depths. Our world heals until the next cycle begins." The next cycle. I understood now. This had happened repeatedly throughout Eris IX history. The shadow would consume a vessel, temporarily withdraw, allowing the planet to recover. Then, over generations, its hunger would grow again. The corruption would spread, until another vessel crashed on the planet and the cycle repeated. It wasn't salvation. It was a temporary reprieve, bought with the complete annihilation of beings like me. "And Talon?" I asked. "His resistance, what do they believe?" Elroth's eyes narrowed. "Heretics. They believe the cycle can be broken, that the shadow can be bound permanently without a vessel. They are fools who misinterpret the ancient texts. Or perhaps they understood something the devotees didn't. Something hidden in those ruins Talon had mentioned." "Leave me," I said, a new authority in my voice. "I need to prepare myself." Elroth bowed and withdrew, clearly believing I was accepting my fate. But as soon as he was gone, I focused on my new awareness, stretching my senses through the settlement until I located Talon's unique life signature, dimmer than the others, weakened by his injuries, but still vibrant with determination. He was being held in a chamber several levels below mine, guarded by 2 Elkarii warriors. With my enhanced perception, I could sense the layout of the passages between us, the positions of every Elkarii in the complex. And with my altered physiology, I discovered something else. I could manipulate the black substance that now permeated my body. Concentrating, I extended a tendril of darkness from my fingertip, watching with fascination as it responded to my will, stretching and reshaping itself. The power was intoxicating, and for a moment I understood the allure of complete submission to the shadow, to become one with such ancient, limitless potential. I shook myself from these thoughts. They weren't entirely my own. The shadow's influence was growing stronger, its desires merging with mine. I needed to act quickly before I lost more of myself. Using my new abilities, I slipped out of my quarters and moved through the settlement undetected. The darkness seemed to bend around me, rendering me nearly invisible as I descended to Talon's prison. The guards never saw me approach. One moment they stood at attention, the next they collapsed silently as tendrils of darkness briefly enveloped their heads, rendering them unconscious. Talon looked up in alarm as I entered his cell, his good eye widening at my transformed appearance. "Skyfaller," he whispered. "What have you become?" "Something in between," I replied, helping him to his feet. "But still myself enough to know I need your help. Take me to the ruins. Show me what's hidden there." Talon studied me for a long moment, perhaps searching for signs that the shadow was deceiving him through me. Finally, he nodded. "We must hurry. The Ascension ritual cannot be allowed to proceed." With Talon guiding me and my new abilities concealing our movements, we slipped out of the settlement. Instead of heading upward toward the surface, Talon led me deeper into the mountain through ancient passages that predated the current Elkarii settlement. These tunnels showed signs of the civilization the Elkarii had once been, a technologically advanced society whose ruins hinted at remarkable achievements. "Before the shadow," Talon explained as we hurried through a corridor lined with dormant machines, "we travelled between stars. We bent matter to our will. We were more. What happened?" I asked, though I already knew parts of the answer from the shadow's memories. "Hubris. Our ancestors sought power beneath the planet's crust, energy sources to fuel our expansion. Instead, they found the shadow, sleeping since our world's formation." He paused at an intersection, choosing a path that sloped steeply downward. "They thought they could harness it, study it. They built facilities around it, conducted experiments, but the shadow was conscious in ways they couldn't comprehend. It studied them in return." We descended further, the passages growing older, the technology more alien and advanced. Finally, we reached a massive sealed door covered in warning symbols. Talon placed his hand on a panel beside it, and to my surprise, it illuminated faintly, responding to his touch. "The resistance preserves the old knowledge," he explained. "We maintain what we can of our ancestors' technology, their understanding. While the devotees worship, we remember." The door slid open with a groan of ancient mechanisms, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Unlike the ritual chambers I'd seen before, this space was clearly a research facility. Banks of equipment lined the walls, preservation tanks contained specimens I couldn't identify, and at the center stood a massive device that resembled a particle accelerator built around a column of contained darkness similar to the one I'd encountered in the second ritual. "The original containment facility," Talon said, moving toward a console that still showed signs of power, "where our ancestors first studied the shadow before they understood what they were dealing with." As I stepped into the chamber, my transformed body reacted strongly to the presence of the shadow sample. The black veins beneath my skin pulsed painfully, and I felt the shadow within me reaching towards its larger self, trying to reunite. "What am I looking for here?" I asked, fighting to maintain control. Talen activated the ancient console, bringing dormant screens to life. Symbols scrolled across them, a language I shouldn't have understood, but somehow did. Another sign of how deeply the shadow had altered me. "The true prophecy," Talon said, "not the corrupted version Rissa teaches, but the original warning left by our ancestors." The screens displayed what appeared to be research logs, documentation of the initial discovery of the shadow and the subsequent catastrophe. I absorbed the information rapidly, my enhanced mind processing it faster than should have been possible. The truth was more complex than either Talon or Rissa had explained. The shadow wasn't simply a malevolent entity or a misunderstood god. It was something far older, a cosmic anomaly, a singularity of pure potential that had been trapped within Eris IX during the planet's formation. It had no inherent consciousness until it encountered the Elkarii, from whom it learned awareness, identity, desire. And what it desired, ultimately, was freedom, to leave the planetary prison where it had been confined for billions of years. Each vessel it consumed brought it closer to that goal, adding knowledge, adaptability, power. The temporary planetary restoration that followed each absorption wasn't benevolence. It was the shadow regathering its strength, concentrating its essence for the next phase. The Ascension ritual, I said slowly, the horrifying truth becoming clear. It's not just about merging with the shadow, it's about releasing it, Talon confirmed grimly. Each vessel before you brought the shadow closer to freedom. The healing of our world is merely a side effect of its concentration, but with each cycle the effect diminishes. Our world dies a little more each time, and the shadow grows stronger. How many more vessels would it need? I asked. Talon's expression darkened. You would be the 8th. The prophecy warns that after the 9th, the shadow will have gathered enough strength, enough understanding of corporeal existence to break free entirely. And then what? Consumption on a scale beyond imagination. Not just our world, but others. The shadow hungers for all existence, all potential. Talon gestured to another section of the facility, where containment fields held smaller samples of the black substance. Our ancestors tried to warn future generations. They left contingencies. He led me to what appeared to be a weapons vault, where devices of unfathomable design lay dormant. They created technologies that could potentially neutralize the shadow, drive it back to its original state of dormancy. But such weapons would destroy our world in the process. It was deemed too great a price. So instead, they created the ritual cycle, I concluded, a way to temporarily appease the shadow, buy more time. Yes, but over generations, the truth was lost. The warnings became worship. The containment became communion. Talon's eye gleamed with bitter irony, and the shadow encouraged this distortion. It spoke to the sensitive among our people, twisted their dreams, their understanding. It's patient, skyfaller. It has waited billions of years. What are a few generations to such an entity? As we spoke, I became aware of a growing disturbance within me. The shadow fragment that had infiltrated my body was responding to proximity to these ancient containment fields, these weapons designed to combat it. It knew I was learning dangerous truths. It was accelerating its takeover of my consciousness. Black tendrils began to emerge from my skin unbidden, whipping around me with increasing agitation. My vision blurred, splitting between normal perception and something else, a perspective that saw energy rather than matter, potential rather than reality. It's fighting me, I gasped, dropping to one knee as pain lanced through my transformed body. It knows what we're doing. Talon moved quickly to one of the ancient devices. We must act now. There is another way, not destruction, but true containment. A permanent solution our ancestors designed, but never implemented. It requires a vessel, but not one that surrenders. One that commands. What do you mean? I asked, struggling to maintain control as the shadow's influence grew stronger. The merger can be controlled, dominated by the vessel, rather than the entity, Talon explained, activating the device. It requires tremendous will and a fundamental alteration to the Ascension ritual. No vessel before you has attempted it. All eventually surrendered, consumed by fear or temptation. The device hummed to life, projecting a field of energy that momentarily suppressed the shadow's activity within me. The relief was immediate, but temporary. I could feel the entity adapting, fighting back. How do we do this? I asked. We must return to the settlement, Talon said grimly. The Ascension chamber contains the equipment needed, though its purpose has been forgotten. We must modify it before the ritual begins. They'll never allow that, I pointed out. Rissa, Elroth, they're committed to their version of the prophecy. They will have no choice, Talon replied, looking at me meaningfully. You are their god, are you not? Command them. He was right. Despite the shadow's growing influence, I still had power of my own. The power they had given me through their belief, their devotion. I could use that. But before we could leave, alarms began to sound throughout the ancient facility. On the still active screens, we could see Elkarii warriors pouring into the outer passages, led by Elroth and Rissa. "They've discovered your absence," Talen said urgently. "We must hurry." We fled deeper into the facility, seeking another exit. As we ran, the shadow within me grew more aggressive, making movement increasingly difficult. Black tendrils erupted from my skin, tangling around my limbs, trying to impede my progress. It knew what we intended now, not just containment, but subjugation. It would not surrender its potential freedom willingly. We finally reached an emergency shaft that led upward toward the surface, away from the approaching search party. As Talon began to climb, I hesitated, an idea forming in my mind. "The weapons your ancestors created," I said, "they're still functional?" Talon looked down at me, understanding dawning in his expression. "You cannot. It would destroy our world." "Not all of them," I countered. "Just enough to convince Rissa and the others that there's a greater threat than disrupting their precious ritual." Reluctantly, Talon nodded. "The primary containment disruptors are located in the eastern section, but using them risks accelerating the Shadow's activity throughout the planet." "A calculated risk," I said, already moving in that direction. "Meet me at the surface, be ready to move quickly." Talon continued upward while I fought my increasingly rebellious body towards the weapons vault. The Shadow was making its opposition physically manifest now. The black veins beneath my skin writhed painfully, and occasional bursts of agony shot through my nervous system. But with each attack, I grew more determined to master this entity, rather than be mastered by it. I reached the vault just as I heard Elkarii warriors entering the main chamber behind me. Using my enhanced strength, I forced open the sealed door and grabbed what appeared to be a handheld device. Sleek, alien technology built to channel and direct energy against the Shadow. When Elroth and his warriors rounded the corner, they found me holding the weapon toward one of the containment fields housing a Shadow sample. Their forward motion halted abruptly. "Starfallen," Elroth began cautiously. "What are you doing?" "Learning the truth," I replied, my voice resonating with harmonics that weren't entirely human anymore. "The real prophecy, the real purpose of the Ascension." Rissa pushed her way to the front, her eyes widening at the sight of the ancient technology in my hands. "Those devices are forbidden. They are from the time of heresy." "They are from the time of truth," I corrected her. "Before the Shadow corrupted your understanding, twisted your beliefs to serve its purposes." "You blaspheme," she hissed. "The communion has clearly been tainted." "The communion has clarified everything," I countered. "I've seen the Shadow's memories, Rissa. I know what happened to your ancestors, to the vessels who came before me. I know what the Ascension truly means." To demonstrate my point, I activated the weapon, directing a narrow beam of energy at the contained Shadow sample. The black substance reacted violently, contorting and shrinking away from the beam. Simultaneously, the Shadow entity within me recoiled in shared pain, its tendrils retreating beneath my skin. The effect on the Elkarii was immediate. Many fell to their knees, not in worship, but in terror. Even Elroth stepped back, his confident demeanor shaken. "The Ascension proceeds on my terms," I declared, lowering the weapon but keeping it ready. "The ritual will be modified according to the original designs, not the corrupted version you've been practicing." "This is not the prophecy," Rissa protested, though with less conviction. "The prophecy is a distortion," I said firmly, "created by the Shadow to facilitate its eventual escape. I will not be the 8th vessel consumed. I will be the first to master the Shadow, to bend it to my will rather than surrender to it." For a moment I thought they might attack despite the weapon, but then something unexpected happened. The Shadow within me, perhaps realizing the precariousness of its position, suddenly changed tactics. Instead of fighting me, it offered something else: knowledge, power, a glimpse of what could be accomplished through true symbiosis, rather than domination by either party. My vision swam as new understanding flooded my consciousness. The shadow showed me possibilities I hadn't considered, a middle path between complete absorption and rigid containment, a true partnership that could benefit both us and Eris IX. When my focus returned to the external world, I found the Elkarii watching me with a mixture of fear and fascination. "There is another way," I told them, lowering the weapon completely. "Not the cycle of temporary restoration followed by greater deterioration. Not planetary destruction through these weapons, but true balance." "What way?" Elroth demanded. "The Ascension ritual can be modified to create a symbiotic relationship rather than consumption," I explained, drawing on the knowledge the Shadow had just shared. "A true merger where neither entity dominates the other. It's what your ancestors originally intended before the Shadow subverted their understanding." Rissa's expression showed skepticism, but also curiosity. "And we should trust this revelation. How do we know the Shadow doesn't speak through you now, offering false hope?" It was a fair question. The Shadow was ancient, cunning, manipulative. It had twisted the Elkari's beliefs over generations. Why would it suddenly offer a genuine solution? "You don't know," I admitted. "Just as I don't know if this is truth or another deception. But I know this: your current path leads to your world's eventual destruction. The Shadow grows stronger with each vessel it consumes. Eventually it will break free entirely, and Eris IX will be just the first casualty." I gestured towards the ancient technology surrounding us. "Your ancestors understood the threat. They built all this to contain it, study it, neutralize it if necessary. They were scientists, not worshippers. They sought understanding, not divine intervention." My words resonated with some of the Elkarii warriors. I could see doubt flickering in their glowing eyes, uncertainty in their postures. Even Elroth seemed conflicted. Only Rissa remained steadfast. "The Ascension proceeds as it has for generations," she insisted. "The Starfallen will fulfill the prophecy." "I will participate in the Ascension," I agreed, "but according to the original protocol, not your corrupted version. The choice is simple, Rissa. Adapt your ritual or watch me use these weapons to send the Shadow into dormancy, even if it devastates your world in the process." It was a bluff, of course. I had no intention of destroying Eris IX and the Elkarii civilization, but Rissa didn't know that, and from the way the Shadow roiled within me, it believed my threat might be genuine. After a tense standoff, Rissa finally inclined her head slightly. "The Starfallen will have his way. The ritual will be reconsidered." As we made our way back to the settlement, my mind was in turmoil. The Shadow continued to share knowledge with me, now that it had committed to this new approach. I learned more about its nature, its origins, its capabilities. It wasn't evil in any human sense, it was simply alien, operating according to principles and desires incomprehensible to biological life. Its primary drive was expansion, integration, absorption of all patterns and potentials. It had been trapped within Eris IX since the planet's formation, a cosmic anomaly imprisoned by chance. When the Elkarii discovered it, it experienced conscious interaction for the first time in billions of years. It learned from them, adapted to them, began to understand the concept of identity, of self versus other. And it wanted out. The vessels, the unfortunate beings who crashed on Eris IX, were its attempts to understand physical existence, to gain the knowledge needed to eventually transcend its planetary prison. Each vessel it consumed taught it more about corporeal life, about the physics of matter and energy, about the cosmos beyond Eris IX. But in sharing this knowledge with me, it also revealed its vulnerability. The Shadow needed a vessel to interact with the physical world, Without one, it remained limited, confined, incomplete. This interdependence was the key to the solution I now envisioned. By the time we reached the settlement, I had formulated a plan. With Talon rejoining us secretly and the Shadow reluctantly cooperating, I began directing modifications to the Ascension Chamber. Ancient technology, long misunderstood as ritual objects, was reactivated and reconfigured according to the original specifications. The Elkarii worked through the night, many still skeptical but following orders out of reverence or fear. Rissa observed with thinly veiled hostility, while Elroth seemed increasingly convinced by the technical nature of the modifications, which aligned with fragments of knowledge preserved in their most ancient texts. As dawn approached, the third dawn I'd experienced on Eris IX, each slightly brighter than the last as the planet temporarily healed, preparations were complete. The Ascension Chamber had been transformed from a sacrificial altar to something closer to its original purpose, a controlled integration mechanism designed to facilitate communication and symbiosis rather than consumption. "It is time," Rissa announced, as the settlement's population gathered outside the chamber. "The Starfallen faces his destiny." I stood before the assembled Elkarii, my transformed body now more shadow than human in appearance. The black substance had spread throughout me, altering my physiology in ways I still didn't fully understand. But my mind remained my own, or at least a version of my mind expanded and enhanced by the Shadow's influence without being consumed by it. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," I told them, "not the continuation of a cycle, but its transformation. What follows is not worship, but partnership." Many looked confused, others hopeful. Some, particularly among Rissa's devoted followers, appeared angry or frightened, but none opposed me as I turned and entered the chamber, followed by Talon, Elroth, and finally, reluctantly, Rissa herself. Inside, the central pillar of shadow substance pulsed with anticipation. The modified equipment hummed with power, drawn from deep within the planet. Not destructive mining, but a controlled tapping of geothermal energy as the Elkari's ancestors had originally designed. "The final communion begins," Rissa intoned, falling back on familiar ritual language despite the altered circumstances. I approached the pillar, feeling the shadow within me, responding to its larger self, eager for reunification but now tempered with caution, with respect for the boundaries I had established. "Not communion," I corrected. "Conversation." I placed my hands against the pillar, and as before, the black substance flowed over me. But this time, controlled by the modified equipment, it didn't seek to engulf me entirely. Instead, it created a dynamic interface, a boundary where my consciousness and the Shadow's vast awareness could meet as equals. The sensation was indescribable, like having my mind simultaneously compressed to a singular point and expanded to encompass galaxies. I saw existence from the Shadow's perspective, not as discrete objects and beings, but as patterns of potential, configurations of energy in constant flux. And the Shadow experienced reality through my human perception, the solidity of matter, the linearity of time, the distinct boundaries between self and other. For what felt like eternity, we exchanged, adapted, negotiated, not with words or thoughts as humans would understand them, but with direct transfers of concept and experience. I came to understand the Shadow's eons of isolation, its desperate hunger for connection, for expansion. It came to understand human concepts of cooperation, mutual benefit, and sustainability. Gradually, a new arrangement emerged. The Shadow would remain primarily contained within Eris IX, but with my transformed body as a permanent interface with the physical world. It would direct its energies towards planetary restoration, rather than escape, healing the damage it had caused over generations. In return, I would provide it with connection, with purpose, with a structured outlet for its boundless potential. Neither of us would dominate the other. Neither would be fully what we had been before. Together, we would be something new, something that could benefit both the Shadow and the Elkarii civilization. When I finally pulled away from the pillar, I knew I had changed irrevocably. My body was now a hybrid form, still recognizably humanoid but infused throughout with the Shadow's essence. My mind was expanded beyond human limitations, yet retained my core identity, my values, my memories of Earth and humanity. The Elkarii in the chamber stared at me with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Even Rissa seemed speechless at the transformation she had witnessed. "It is done," I said, my voice resonating with harmonics that suggested the vastness now contained within me. "Not as your corrupted prophecy foretold, but as your ancestors truly intended. Balance is restored, not temporarily, but permanently." We emerged from the chamber to find the world transformed. The sky had cleared completely, revealing a sun that had been obscured by storms for generations. The landscape, previously barren and ash-covered, now bloomed with vegetation. Not just the pale, stunted plants of previous temporary restorations, but vibrant ecosystems spreading outward from the settlement in all directions. The Elkarii fell to their knees, not in worship of me, but in joy at the restoration of their world. Only Talon remained standing, a smile of vindication on his face. "You have broken the cycle," he said quietly. "Done what our ancestors could not." "Not broken," I corrected. "Transformed. The Shadow remains within your world, within me. But now it serves life rather than consuming it." In the days that followed, I helped the Elkarii understand what had happened, what would come next. The Shadow, speaking through me when necessary, shared knowledge that had been lost for generations. Scientific understanding, technological principles, cultural memories. Under my guidance, they began to rebuild, not just their environment, but their civilization. Rissa eventually accepted the new reality. Though she never abandoned her devotion entirely, she simply redirected it, becoming a keeper of history rather than a High Priestess. Elroth embraced the restoration enthusiastically, leading expeditions to reclaim territories long abandoned to the Shadow's corruption, and Talon became something of an ambassador between me and his people, helping translate the often incomprehensible concepts the Shadow shared through our connection. As for me, Jaxon Harper, astronaut, explorer, reluctant deity, I came to accept my new existence. I would never return to Earth, never be fully human again. But I had found a purpose beyond anything I could have imagined when my ship crashed on this distant world. I had become neither god nor victim, neither conqueror nor sacrifice. I had become a bridge between incomprehensible cosmic power and tangible physical existence, between ancient hunger and new growth. Sometimes, in quiet moments when the Shadow's vastness settles into the background of my consciousness, I look up at the stars visible in Eris IX, now clear sky. I wonder if Earth still exists out there, if humanity still reaches for those same stars. I wonder if they ever learned what happened to my mission, to me. But these moments of nostalgia grow less frequent as time passes. My human past recedes, not erased but transformed into something larger. The Shadow and I continue our negotiation of existence, our balance of power and purpose. The Elkarii civilization flourishes around us, rebuilding what was lost, creating what never existed before. And sometimes in the deepest parts of night, I sense something new stirring within the Shadow's awareness, a curiosity about what lies beyond Eris IX, beyond this single planet where it has been trapped for eons. Not an escape attempt, not yet, but a wondering, a potential. For now our agreement holds, for now balance remains. But I know with the expanded awareness the Shadow has given me, that nothing is permanent. Change is the only constant in the universe. Someday, perhaps centuries from now, the Shadow and I will face new decisions, new possibilities. But that is for another time, another story. For now, I am the Starfallen, the one who crashed on a distant planet where they thought I was a god. And in some ways, perhaps I have become one.